Good evening, Patriots, and welcome to the live broadcast of the Douglas Ducote Show. You had many places you could be tonight. You chose to be here with me, and for that, I am forever grateful. Thank you very, very much. Tonight's show, Patriots, my guest is going to be U.S. Army Colonel James Hutton, retired. He was the Assistant Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs, appointed by President Donald J. Trump during his first term in office. Colonel Hutton is a highly decorated career Army officer with more than 26 years of service with deployments in Iraq, Bosnia, Kuwait, Kosovo, Germany, as well as many others. Colonel Hutton led the communication planning for major combat operations, including international media coverage of the surge in 2007-2009. He's also the author of the book Biden-Harris: Views on Misguided Policies, Foreign and Domestic, which covers the fall of Afghanistan, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, threats from China, as well as other topics. Colonel Hutton, welcome to the show, sir, and thank you very much for joining us tonight.
It's great to be with you, Doug.
Wonderful. I'd like to start off by taking a few moments to ask you to share a little more in-depth, per se, about your military and civilian career in your words. I could read off this bio, but it's vast, and it would probably be better served if it came from you directly.
It just means I'm old. That's what it really means. But I was an Army ROTC student at Oklahoma State University, and it wasn't my intent going into college. My father was an Army officer too, but I was going to go to college and do something completely different. And then I kind of missed home. You know, I tell everyone my hometown is a place with a flagpole and a post headquarters and a PX and a commissary. Wherever that is, I feel at home. Sometimes I drive on Fort Myer or Fort Belvoir around here, and just to feel like I'm a little bit at home. So this has been part of my life, my whole life. I think I went to about 16 schools growing up and graduated from Fort Campbell High School, which gives you an indicator of where we were. And but then I found my way back to ROTC and was a field artillery officer at first station at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, but at a basic training brigade. Go figure how you figure that for a field artilleryman. But I did that and then served in Germany and commanded a multiple launch rocket system battery as one of my capstone assignments over there. And then I changed to public affairs, and I was going to do it for 2 years. And there was an old-fashioned way in the Army. You would go and do a job outside of your specialty for a couple of years and then go back to your branch and then go back, back and forth. And they found out that it really made you not expert enough in either field. So they gave us an opportunity to stay in that other area. And I did now, and I'm glad I did. Now I know it limited my career. There were no generals in public affairs until 5 or 6 years after I left. So okay. It's just not the path to be the chief of staff of the Army, which is okay with me. Yeah. But I did every position you could do in public affairs, from an installation PAO at deputy installation PAO at Fort Irwin, California, which I'm sure you're familiar with, the National Training Center.
TC.
Right. And then later on, I went to a place called the Center for Army Lessons Learned. And that's where I discovered writing, because they just said, go downstairs and write about everything in the Army that you want to write about. We don't even tell you the topics. And I loved it. For 2 years, I did that. And then it was just off from one field public affairs assignment after another, including the 1st Cavalry Division, where I deployed to Iraq. That was my first tour. That was a year. And then we came back for a while. I moved up to 3 Corps at Fort Hood, and went back to Iraq again. And this time, 3 months into that assignment, they said, no, your 1 year tour is now going to be 15 months. So that first 3 months didn't count. We're just starting over. Right. And so that was a very long and arduous tour. And that was during the surge. And we made great strides for the operation as it was going. The one disappointment I had, I think, in those first 2 tours, especially, was that we can never really describe what the mission was. We knew we were there, and we were helping. There was no doubt that Iraq was left a better place after we left, but at the same time, the mission we were there for didn't really exist, and so there's some mixed feelings I have about the service in that time. But then I came back from the second tour, and wouldn't you know it, General Odierno, who was my commander at 3 Corps, was named the 4-star commander over there to replace General Petraeus. And so I looked at him, and he looked at me, and he said, "Okay, well, I'll get the team together. We'll go back with you, 5 or 6 months later after that 15-month tour." So it was pretty rough. We were still a little bit raw after that, but it was worthwhile for him and worthwhile for all of us. And then I came to the DC area, went to National War College, and then when that was followed by a 3-year assignment in the Pentagon, and I ended up retiring as the Deputy Chief of Army Public Affairs. And right away, after that, I went to a nonprofit. You may have heard of it, called TAPS.
Yes.
Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. It helps families of the fallen. Stayed there for about a year, and then a person called me from VA and said, "Hey, would you come over here and fill a slot?" And I did. And then ultimately, when President Trump won election in 2016, a friend of mine who was on the campaign said, "How would you like to be a appointee with the administration and give up all of your civil service protections and all that, and we can fire you anytime at any date, and we have to give you one day's written notice?" And I said, "Sure, sign me up." It was the best move professionally that I've ever made in my life. The one thing that I can tell everyone with complete candor about President Trump, whenever I saw him at the White House or wherever I saw him, if he talked to any of us about VA stuff, veterans, things that we were doing, he was always, "Do you have enough for what you need to do for the veterans? Or is there something we should be doing for the veterans that we're not doing right now? How can we make that change?" And virtually anything we asked him for, he gave us. He made a way. He goes, "I don't care if I have to call a Democrat in the House or anywhere else. I'll make a call to anybody." Yeah. And he held to that. And so, everyone who wants to say how he is behind the scenes and doesn't care, he just didn't apply. It was just not true. So anyway, that was a great experience. And I was at the White House every week, and both of my jobs, the public affairs and the intergovernmental affairs, dealt with people from all over the country. And there were lots of meetings at the White House of people from different states and municipalities and counties and such, irrespective of party, that came to those meetings. And virtually every time there was someone who came up to me and said, "I've got a veterans problem. Can you help me?" And we were able to help them. And we didn't ask what party they were.
Right.
It was helping the veterans. And, that's one of the few issues in Congress and across government veterans are that is not as partisan as, everything else,
Exactly. Yeah.
And it should be that way. Now it's become a little bit more partisan. Yeah. I don't know if you saw Doug Collins was voted in to be the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. He didn't get a unanimous vote, but since Secretary Wilkie, who was the first one, didn't get a unanimous vote ever in the history of VA. It used to be every secretary got a unanimous vote, and that doesn't happen anymore. In fact, none of the cabinet officers selected this time have had a unanimous vote, except I think Secretary Rubio got a 99-0 vote. So he's the only one with a unanimous vote of whoever was there. I don't know who didn't vote for him, but but all the others have been very close. Some of them are close for no apparent reason, like Pam Bondi. I think she got 54 votes. She only got one Democrat. That just doesn't even make common sense that If someone's qualified, basically, then you give the president his cabinet, the first time out, especially the first time out. But if it's just purely on ideological grounds, that just doesn't make sense. If you've got some big beef or someone's got something really terrible in his past and you vote for him, that's one thing. But
right.
If you're a Democrat, I'm not going to vote for you. You're a Republican, I'm not going to vote for you. It doesn't make sense.
Hold up with the FBI director is killing me.
Well, right. The president knows Kash Patel. He knows him. Yeah. He knows what he's like. He knows him behind closed doors. He knows him in public. Yeah. And if that's who he wants to run the FBI, then he should get it. Now, that's not a cabinet post, but it's a very, very key assignment within the Department of Justice. And we certainly, I expect he'll get the vote, but it'll be mostly along party lines as well.
I agree. But hopefully that'll be first part of next week.
Right. And then there's other ones too. For example, a friend of mine, Paul Lawrence, has been nominated to be the Deputy Secretary of VA. He hasn't been voted on yet. I assume he'll get a party line vote too, but there's just no reason at all not to pick a guy like that who knows the business from top to bottom and has a sterling career in wearing the uniform, and he was the undersecretary for benefits in the last administration. So there's no reason that guys like that shouldn't be serving. Did I lose you?
Oh, there you are.
Okay. Yeah, you froze there for a second, but so anyway, that's really my history. I mean, I did assignments, as you said, Kosovo, Bosnia, 3 tours in Iraq, Kuwait, and then I did a 4-year tour in Germany. That was not really a hardship tour by any standard, but I was able to command troops over there, and that was really my last field artillery assignment. For all intents and purposes, and then I was public affairs after that. So kind of an oddball career. There's only 200 or so public affairs officers in the Army. And, but I was fortunate. I was General Odierno's public affairs officer for 2 tours, and General Corelli, who had before him at First Cav, later became the vice chief of staff of the Army. So, I was able to work for really top guys, and I traveled the country with both of them, especially General Odierno. We went all north, south, east, west, everywhere around the country. And there were places we went where they gave him a rifle and they gave me a rifle and said, "Okay, you got that corner and we got that corner." And there he was, a 4-star general carrying a rifle. So, but that's the way of war, and that's just what we expect.
Yeah, exactly. And the position that you had there, the VA, as a veteran, and I know the veterans that watch this program as well, that's an area that throughout history has been not looked at the way it should by administrations. And, it's come a long way since, let's say since the Vietnam era, for instance, but it's still got a lot of work to be done. And I know that Donald Trump in this next 4 years is going to, go back to what he was doing when you guys were in there the last 4, and that is doing everything he can to help take care of America's warfighters. And
I'll tell you, the staff that was there, the permanent staff, as well as the appointees, Doug Collins, the one who's there now, the secretary, a truly great American person, who was a colonel in the reserve himself, a former congressman, former lawyer, just top level, high quality people who are committed to nothing else but the veterans. I don't know a lot of people who go to the VA thinking, I'm going to be famous someday. That's just not why you do it. That's not what it's all about. It's all about the veterans. And I think that the focus has changed in the last maybe 20 years, that the veteran is the focus now, not the organization of Veterans Affairs. And it's come a long way since inception. The Veterans Administration under Omar Bradley Here he was a 5-star general, and he came, and that was just an assignment, an Army assignment for him.
Right.
And he came and he took it from nothing. And remember, we had 16 million people that served in World War II. 16 million people wore that uniform.
Yeah.
And that was up from an army of about 100,000 when the war started.
Yeah.
So
You're right.
at the end of that war, we had 400,000 killed, but we had way more than that wounded, injured,
Yeah.
and we had no facilities whatsoever to speak of for all of those veterans. And so General Bradley had to really set it up from scratch. And then it had some really rough periods, as you said, in the 60s.
Yeah.
But I think now we're at least on track about who we're there for, at the VA. But
which is very good. Yeah, I mean that's something that's needed to come for a long time, and we're getting there. It's like everything in government. There's all kinds of red tape, and there's there is some people that get involved that are political, but I do believe that for the most part, those that work at the VA are there for a good reason, and that is to help our warfighters.
Yeah, and it's a huge organization. It's the second biggest organization in government besides Department of Defense. Individually, it's more than about 450,000 employees. That's a lot, but it takes it takes quite a bit. We hope that that's mostly doctors and nurses and that kind of thing, and not people like me that were pushing papers around a desk. But you got to have some of those, but mostly we want people taking care of veterans.
I want to ask you, so when I retired from the military, I went into I started a nonprofit, Veterans United for Justice, and we started helping vets with PTSD. And one of the things that I started to realize, and I don't know if what I was told, what I'm going to share with the audience here in a second, is factual or not, and that's why I would like to ask you this question. The VA says that there's 22 veterans commit suicide per day. What I was noticing helping vets out was that number was way higher than that. And then when I started asking around about it, was told that the VA actually in that 22, they only count, and tell me if this is right or not, they only count those that left a note behind and it's obvious beyond doubt that they committed suicide. Is that true? Because there's a lot of others that mysteriously, they get on a motorcycle 100 miles an hour and go off the interstate, for instance, knowing that if they, if it was known they committed suicide, then the family might not get, the life insurance. So have you heard anything about that as far as how the VA counts what is and what isn't a suicide?
Well, to my knowledge, what is listed as the cause of death on the death certificate is what is used. So that would be usually local officials, or if the person's still on active duty, of course, then it could be a civilian, it could be a military, but that is my understanding, is that cause of death listed on the death certificate is what's good. Now, does that always capture it? Probably not, because that guy on the motorcycle you're talking about that drove way too fast. I mean, we had several when I got back from my first tour at Fort Hood. They would go out and they would buy those motorcycles that can go 150 miles an hour. And the next thing you know, they're on the highway and dead. Now, did they purposely kill themselves? Sometimes it's going to be too hard to know, but certainly there were enough. And that number 22 was a misleading figure all along. I think now they're saying it's 17, but they're not counting it the same way. I think that at first we were counting anyone who had ever touched a uniform. If they died by suicide, then that was attributed to, the war and such. But several of those people that have died by suicide on a daily basis never even deployed. Some were in the National Guard, some were in the reserve, and they died. And so it's hard to know what the cause was and all of those. But I can tell you, I remember when General Corelli was the vice chief of staff of the Army, he would conduct a autopsy, not a physical autopsy. I mean, that's separate, but an autopsy of the person's life. And he would actually conduct those meetings as a 4-star general with all this staff of suicide specialists and all of that. And they would say, this is what this guy was doing that day. This is what he was doing the months before. This was his marital status. And then trying to find all these, particular parts and pieces to try to put it together to see if you can determine a composite of why someone does this. And then, so, I see this in Captain Jones. He's exhibiting all these things, but I don't think we really still have gotten to the point where we know exactly why someone takes his own life. We may be better, but just my understanding of what, we've got specialists, we have PhDs that have done nothing but try to help people to keep them from taking their own lives. And it's certainly not perfect. And, it's not a broken leg that you can take an X-ray and see it 100%. It's far more complicated that way. In fact, we've even changed the way we talk about suicide. You notice how I've said died by suicide, because when people would say someone committed suicide, that was because it was viewed as a sinful thing to do, committed robbery, committed murder, committed suicide. And so we kind of take a different view of suicide because what we figured out, it's not a selfish act. It's not, you just don't care about your fellow man and that kind of thing. It's just, it's just too complicated to lay any of those things to. And the other thing that I think needs to be talked about still is the medications people receive. Sleep medications. And, when you get out at the end, and here's the difference where VA was and where VA is. When I left the Army in 2013, I had to go through a physical, and I had to go through the VA course saying, you need to turn in your paperwork, and here's all the paperwork you need and all of it. When my father retired in 1981, it was, here's your piece of paper and you are a retiree. Go figure it out if you want some VA.
Yeah.
And he went more than 20 years. He didn't, in fact, he went more than almost 30 years or 40 years before he went to a VA. And he had things wrong with him when he left, a hearing, a heart problem that he had for years and years. And right away he was adjudicated 60%, and he had been for all those years. But he said, I never really even thought about it. In fact, it was kind of this honor thing about tough guys don't go to the VA. And so he went because I told him about it years later. Well, it shouldn't be that way. And it's not now. I know that when you leave, if you don't go along with the system to get yourself enrolled in VA or get what you need, then you really almost have to do it on purpose. Just going to all the meetings would help you there. So, and we're helping guys with jobs and stuff like that too. We had job classes and all of that. My dad didn't have any of that. Well, all of that makes a difference on things like suicide, because we know that personal relationships have something to do with that. But
exactly.
Anyway, I don't. That's my VA pitch, and I'm not at VA anymore. I'm outside of government. So,
well, I appreciate you sharing that with us. All the subjects that you talk about in your book, I've covered here on this show many times. But it's a perspective from my point of view as a non-commissioned officer, as a staff sergeant. Whereas, you start off as a lieutenant and rose to the rank of full bird colonel. So your perspective is very valuable, not only to myself, but also to the audience. So my first question would be, probably every service member that wore the uniform in the Middle East, myself included, asked why the Biden administration rushed to exit, to get out of Afghanistan, so much so that we were forced to leave behind billions of dollars of our military equipment to fall into the hands of our enemy, the Taliban. In my personal opinion, that falls under treason and aiding and abetting the enemy. There's people out there that will say that the chiefs of staff briefed the president on how to do it right, and he chose not to go their route. And others that say that they didn't, that it was just a cluster. Do you have any insight on that as to why you think the withdrawal went the way it did? And then, of course, we all know what the fallout of that was. And of course, nobody's being held responsible for any of it. But
Right.
Those that served in Afghanistan, are looking at this like, what the hell did we do this for? If we just gave the enemy, and of course they said, they came out and said, oh, well, we destroyed all the equipment. And then we had people that testified in front of Congress that were part of that said we weren't able to. There wasn't enough time for us to destroy the things that we were supposed to destroy. They were just like, we're out of this place. So do you have any insight on that at all that you could share?
Yeah. So you're absolutely right that nobody at any level was hammered for what went wrong. Not the generals, not the Secretary of Defense, not the Chairman of Joint Chiefs, not the president. But it starts, and this is what got me so hard, and this is why I started writing the op-eds that turned into this book, is that President Biden, first of all, he lied to the nation, because he was asked directly, did anyone disagree with your plan of getting us out of there? And he said, nobody did. But then General Austin, to his credit, the Secretary Austin, who I served a partial tour with General Odierno, he was the 3-star commander under General Odierno. So I saw him every day. I don't think he was the most effective Secretary of Defense ever, for sure. But he didn't get up on that in front of Congress and tell a lie. He said, they asked him, did you advise the president at a different course of action? And that was to keep some people in the country for a while, for as long as it took to get the Afghan government up to speed, which would have been a long time. There's no doubt about it. But it was 2,500 people, and we didn't lose a soldier in 18 months before that day at the airport. So he and General McKenzie, who was the CENTCOM commander, and then the 2-star commander on the ground, it turns out everybody advised him against doing what he did. But he was so intent on being the guy who ended a war. And it seemed like he was trying to become like Barack Obama, when, remember, we just drove out of Iraq too. We just left it, and then what happened? ISIS was born, and they stood up, and we had to go back. We had to go back and fight those guys anyway.
I did it twice
under Donald Trump, by the way, and then we left. Now, no one can know everything, but when Secretary Gates, the former defense secretary under Bush and Obama, said that in his 40 years of knowing Joe Biden, he's been wrong at just about every foreign policy decision ever made. And that's true. He just got it all wrong from the very top. And the guys who suffered were guys like, staff sergeants and corporals, and, the guys who did suffer in multiple services. There were some Army guys, some Marines, mostly Marines. They were killed. And just at the top of it, if you didn't know anything about federal service or the State Department or military operations, you don't evacuate the soldiers first,
right,
and then get to the civilians. And then that's just how we did it. And the chaos was unnecessary. We closed down an extra air base we didn't need to close down right at first. We could have done it a very slow process, and protected our soldiers and Marines. and we could have protected a lot of the civilians too, because that's one thing that doesn't get added in. And we know we lost 13 of our own people who wore the uniform, but there were a lot of Afghans who died,
Right.
a lot, and still are dying, and that we don't know about because, it's gone dark. That country's gone dark, back into the Stone Ages that it was before we got there. So that's what led me to start writing. But then issues that came up after that, like Putin's drive into Ukraine, which was very reminiscent of Hitler's drive into Poland.
Yeah.
He only did because he saw how poorly Joe Biden and company handled the extraction from Afghanistan. It gave him the impetus to say, I can do this, and no one's really going to mess with me. And he wasn't wrong.
Right.
Now, one thing he was wrong about, thankfully, was that the Ukrainians were expected. Even General Milley, the chairman of Joint Chiefs, said, "Oh, this is going to last about 3 days."
Right.
And the Ukrainians are going to give up, and they're going to be in Kyiv, and all is going to be done. Well, it didn't happen that way, did it? The
No.
Ukrainians kind of surprised everybody, and they fought, and they still are fighting,
Yeah.
and trying to save their country, just like we would do.
Right.
So, as I told you a week or so ago when we talked about doing this, is that there's one thing I have some disagreements with people in my own party, and that is that some people say we should just stay away from Ukraine, don't give them any more stuff, and just it's not our problem. But there were lots and lots of people who did that in the 30s, and they said Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakia was given away to Adolf Hitler by the British. They didn't even get to come to the. They didn't even get to come to the negotiation. They just said, "Turn yourselves over to the Germans and stay out. Be quiet about it." Well, there were people here saying exactly the same thing, and some people do still say the same thing. I disagree with that, because I think if he had really won in 3 days, like everyone expected it to, his next move was to turn west, and because he really, really wants Poland and Lithuania and Latvia and Estonia. He wants to recreate the Soviet Union, the Soviet Empire, and he wants those countries especially because they're a really good buffer between his country and Western Europe.
Yeah.
And to say that the Ukraine can't be a member of NATO, I don't think we should have preemptively said that. I think our new secretary said that today, or the last couple of days, that no, they're not going to be considered. Well, I don't think that's the kind of thing we should be talking about to the world. But at any rate, there's a lot of people that believe that you should not be part of NATO. I don't know if they should or not, but at the same time, I don't think we need to air that out and say, "Hey, Vladimir, you've won.
Right.
You've won and by the way, we're going to let you keep the eastern part of the country." And
I was very, it was very surprising when Pete Hegseth came out and said that yesterday.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, wow, what? Even if it was true, why would you put that out right now?
Yeah, I was a little bit confused by that, but you you give the guys the benefit of the doubt and say, maybe they'll make it all right. But at the same time, it is what it is. I have people very close to me that are in Ukraine, and so I get kind of weekly feeds about what it's like on the ground.
Yeah, same here.
And I do know that in the last year or so, the Russians have gained territory. Not a lot, but they have lost a lot of people. Now, the estimates are anywhere from 90 to 200,000 killed in action. Now, just imagine that. That's almost at 90,000. We lost 58,000 in the Vietnam War, and look at the effect it had on our country.
Right.
That's almost half of what, it's very close to 50% of what they've already lost in just 3 years.
And he's bringing in now North Korean troops to supplement them.
And they're getting mowed down too, and they're dying bad. And this my source tells me on the ground that that there are still Russians, some with 2 or 3 weeks of training, who are out on the battlefield and give up very quickly because all they want to do is eat because they're not eating enough.
Right.
Yeah, but he said once in a while we run into a unit that is like a really, pretty well trained unit, and they are learning because they weren't an effective fighting force when this started at all.
Yeah.
But they are learning. So, but so are the Ukrainians. And the
Right.
Ukrainians, he said the difference between the Ukrainians and Russians, they've all fought with the same weapons at first. They all fought the same way. They all went to the same staff colleges,
Yeah.
So, so they were very much the same. The difference was that the Ukrainians had a lot more enthusiasm for what they were doing because they were protecting their homeland.
Right.
And let's make no mistake about why Vladimir wants it. First of all, it gives him easy access to a warm water port.
Right.
There's vast fields of wheat. It is the breadbasket of that part of the world. And they also have something called rare earths, these weird and different kinds of metals and stuff that it's called rare for a reason because you don't find it everywhere. Believe it or not.
Good band too, by the way.
Where?
So that was a good band, by the way, too. Rare Earth.
Yeah. And the materials are very important to electronics and everything to deal with computers and broadband and all of that stuff. And they've got lots of it.
Yeah.
And lots of it. And so Ukraine was very important for a lot. It would have been a good staging area to go into Western Europe. Again, poor Poland, they suffered terribly from Russia and from Germany in World War II.
Yeah.
They weren't a country for those 4 or 5 years, and they've come back and they are a good, solid NATO member. But at the same time, they're very small by comparison. And Belarus, which is a country that kind of is on the western side too, it has about 1.5 million population. It would go away quickly because they've got a government that's already conducive to dealing with Vladimir Putin. But it's my feeling that if he had won in 3 days, that was his next move, because he would have thought that, man, my generals are all telling me we've got the greatest army in the world. We're the tough guys. And none of them even had combat experience, So they really didn't know what they could do and what they couldn't do. And they were really deficient, and they still are. And, a lot of those same generals that told him he was great had this big problem of falling out of windows for several of them accidentally fell out of a lot of high, top story buildings and high story buildings. And you mess it there, you actually get killed for it,
Right.
So then the next thing that kind of unfolded was suddenly China's talking about Taiwan again, like they need it desperately all of a sudden, and they've never really been in charge since 1949 when the Chinese became a country, a communist country. They've never really been in charge of Taiwan, never.
Right.
But they claim it is because it was part of the old regime before them. Well, suddenly they were making lots of noises about that and the South China Sea, and they're bullying places like the Philippines and Japan and South Korea and Australia and New Zealand, and they're very methodical about it. They have something, what is it they call it? By 2049. They intend to have flipped every alliance, every agreement, country with which we have agreements, to their side. So this is a long-term project by the Chinese, and they're well on their way. And so you'll see things that don't make sense, like they'll take over some small island in the South China Sea, or they'll start giving a lot of money to a country that, well, isn't big. It has population of 700,000-800,000, but they've got enough land for a base, and it gets them a step closer, say, to Australia. And so they know that they're not going to just flip Australia overnight and make them a communist country, but they also know that if they put pressure on you get inside to their decision cycle, and suddenly Australia and New Zealand and Japan and Korea are making different decisions than they made before. Well, they know this, and they are methodically trying to do that. But they've accelerated that accelerated that process, in my view, under Joe Biden to make it happen faster. Now, fortunately, and this is I give some credit to the Biden administration for this, is that they worked with Japan and South Korea, and there's a lot more room for agreement now. But they're under pressure in those areas, and so they look to I call us Uncle Sugar, and they look to the United States for assistance, and I think that they will get it. And that doesn't mean we're going to land forces again in Guadalcanal, but we can do certain things to stop the Chinese advance. So that happened. And then the other thing was Iran became really let's face it, Iran became a colonial power in its region. We moved out of Iraq and they moved in. Remember, most Iraqis are Shia. And, Saddam Hussein had been a Sunni Muslim, but they were in the minority of the country and they were controlling the majority.
Right.
But Iran is a Shia nation, and so is Iraq. And they went in and they infiltrated a lot. They gave us a lot of problems in Iraq. They have a strong interest in that. But like the Houthis, who are trying to break away from the government of Yemen, Hezbollah, which is in Lebanon, they're all supported by Iran. And so they've become a de facto colonial power in the region. And so that's, I think, if the Israeli problem doesn't get corrected soon, and I really hope President Trump lives up to the idea that, hey, if our hostages aren't out by this weekend, that hell to pay. And I really hope that's what. But the country that should be held for hell to pay will be not just Hamas, because Hamas doesn't exist without Iran.
Yep,
it should be Iran.
Yeah, I'll agree. Yeah.
No nukes can ever go in that. We can't allow nukes to go in that country. I know there's people who say, well, that's hypocritical. You've got nukes yourself, and so your European brothers. Well, we're not crazies either.
Exactly. Yeah.
We're not trying to dominate the region and take over the region, and that's what Iran is trying to do. So these are all connected. One thing led to the other. It's like, I don't want to call it the domino. That was General Eisenhower's idea of the South Vietnam. Why we were there was the domino theory, that if Vietnam fell, then Cambodia, and then all the others would fall. Right. And I'm not saying it's exactly that, but it is very related to that. And let's face it, Russia and China are in cahoots now. They are openly that way. They're in cahoots with Iran. They're trying to broaden it out to places like Brazil, even, the BRICS nation, India.
Right.
Yeah. But something tells me India is not going to go along. They are a democratic nation, and they are actually have a larger population now than China.
Their prime minister was at the White House today.
Yeah. So they're nothing to be trifled with. The Iranians are the Indians have lots and lots of very smart people, and they've got lots of people. And I don't think that if China's thinking they're going to go roll over India, they're wrong.
Yeah, they're wrong. I agree.
Yeah. So these are all interrelated things.
Well, one thing that my wife is a therapist, and very good at what she does. So after tonight's show, I'm going to ask her how it is possible that of all the things I wrote down on this to talk to you about tonight, you already started talking about it before I could ask the question.
Well, that's good.
How did he see? Can he see what I wrote here? Pretty damn amazing. You're good.
We live in the same kind of world. So
right. So not meaning to put you on the spot, all right, but sure. Would you take a minute to address directly the brave men and women that serve our country, that thousands of which tune into this show every Tuesday and Thursday, by sharing your personal thoughts on the future of their service under the Trump-Vance administration compared to what they've been dealing with for the last 4 years.
Yeah, I think you have a president and a government as a whole that is backing you to do your job when you're asked to do it. And I would tell all of those, junior captains as staff sergeants who are platoon sergeants or first sergeants in the unit, don't worry about who the president is. For the most part, the president and the Secretary of Defense are way far away from you.
Right.
Train your soldiers to fight and close with and destroy the enemy by fire and maneuver. That's what we're here to do. We fight and win the nation's wars. We don't fight and win the nation's social justice wars. But that's being taken care of. And I know that's bothered a lot of troops. I talked to a lot of soldiers, even still, and I know that's really bothered them. And they hate to be, put together with these crazy ideas and these different days for every month has a different kind of group that's celebrated. I don't mind celebrating those groups, but I want them celebrated as units. When you're in first platoon of C company of, whatever battalion, that's what should matter to you the most, because the guy who's on your left and the guy who's on your right and the guy who's behind you or woman who's behind you is all that matters. And it doesn't matter
what color skin they are or anything else.
Hispanic or they speak it, they've got a different religion background. That's not what matters. What matters is you're trained and ready to fight and win nation's wars. Protect your buddy on your left and the right, and that's the mentality you should have. So that it doesn't really, I served when I came in the Army. President Reagan was the president.
Me too.
And when I left the Army, President Obama, my big certificate, I got my retirement certificate is signed by Barack Obama.
I'm sorry.
But it didn't matter.
Right. Exactly.
That didn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
We had the same mission. Now, it does matter who the president is, and that's what Afghanistan shows you. But for the individual soldier, mostly it is doing your training individually, collectively, and building that camaraderie within your units. And don't let things divide you artificially, because racial divisions, ethnic divisions within the force are all in our head. There's no real reason for it to exist. We make that decision. We'll make the decision to serve your fellow soldiers, irrespective of all of those other extraneous things that none of them can control, by the way.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
They can't control the president. They can't control their race or their gender or their ethnicity.
Yeah, exactly. Well said.
That's what I would tell the soldiers of today.
Thank you. Well said. Tell everybody where they can buy your book and follow you on social media.
Yeah. So this book, hopefully you can see it. Well, it might be blocked out there.
Hold it back just a little bit. Hold it down. Perfect. Right there.
There you go. Yeah. So this book is available on Amazon.
Okay.
Now the interesting thing is Amazon would not allow me to, they published it, but Amazon would not allow me to advertise on Amazon for this
book,
because they said it was too political at a political time. Now, if it had said Donald Trump's a mean guy,
right,
I have a feeling they would have waived the cost for some. They might not have waived the cost, but they would have allowed me to advertise this book. I feel very confident in that. But nonetheless, some people are buying it. I didn't care if it was a bestseller and all of that. I just had these ideas, and it just struck me after I looked at all the whole list of 50 or so op-eds that I'd written. This like, wow, most of these are tied together. The only one that's not is I wrote a piece about the Queen after she died. Yeah, that's probably the only one that's not somehow connected to one thing's connected to the other
Right.
kind of thing. So
Yeah.
There'll be another one. There'll be another book,
Okay.
but
I've got one coming out too.
all right.
It's what I decided to do was I decided to write about all the funny things that I experienced in my military career that the average person that didn't serve in the military would not realize the sense of humor that we have to have, especially in combat situations.
Right.
So it's going to be about all those funny things that I experienced, as opposed to the horrors of war.
Yeah.
Because I want people to laugh and go, "Wow, you're no different than us," you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. My next book is going to be about. I wrote lots and lots of things. I told you at the Center for Army Lessons Learned, and I'm going to resurrect a lot of them, and it's going to be for public affairs officers and how to run public affairs in the Army. And I've already got about 30 chapters done. So
very cool. Okay,
hopefully I'm done sometime this summer.
good. And so you're on X, formerly Twitter, and also on LinkedIn.
And I'm also on Truth Social, J.E. Hutton, on the same for all of them. You can easily find me on Facebook. I don't usually do too much political military stuff on Facebook, but on Twitter, if don't go in there and think it's a softball pitch, because it's not softball if you're reading my X account for sure.
Well, look, I'm married to a therapist, and all the time I get text messages constantly going, "Please take that down."
Yeah, I get a lot of grief over stuff I put up, but I think a lot of people like me, like you, who when I was in the Army, I never wavered. I never went over the line. I never said things behind. I talk to media people every day. I never said things off the record to them like, this President Obama's a bad. Never. But I did commit myself when I left there to say, I'm going to tell you what I think. You may disagree with it, and of course, in a lot of what I found is a lot of the liberals, especially, they don't go after you on the topic.
Right.
They go after you personally.
Exactly.
I always know that I've scored something.
Yep.
In an X conversation, when they at the end of it they say you're bald.
Right.
If they say you're bald, I know they've run out of material.
Yeah. Well, for me, they always say you're a racist skinhead.
Well, there's always that.
The time. Right.
There's always that, but it makes me laugh a little bit because
you're over the target.
I am. I'm really bald. I mean, I've only been that way for 30 years. I know that. And it doesn't matter to me. It never did matter to me. But I think
both my boys are losing their hair, and they hate it. And I'm like, listen, when I started losing my hair, once I decided I'm shaving it, I got more women coming knocking on my door than I did on a full set of hair. And they just can't grasp that concept. They're still trying to hold on to getting their hair back.
Yeah, I got to be careful there. I've got one woman that, and that's quite enough for me right now.
There you go. Well, thank you, sir, for joining us tonight. You are a true American patriot that has served us all well, and you continue to do that today with honor. And I hope that you'll come back on the show again at a later time and share with us your vast knowledge of the world and your experiences. And we sure do appreciate everything you've done for our country. And we thank you very, very much.
And I appreciate your service too, Doug. Thank you very much.
All righty. Thank you, sir. Have a wonderful and blessed night and weekend. And it's Valentine's Day tomorrow. So
yes, indeed. I'm ready. I hope you are.
Oh, I am. All right. Take care, sir.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Okay. That was a wonderful interview. And I'm so happy that you all got to hear what he had to say. I've been chatting with him a little bit back and forth over the last few days. And I knew that he would put some perspective into this topic, a topic that I've been talking to you all about for a long time now. What we've been through with the last 4 years, what we've been through with the different conflicts, and my personal views on it. And I'm sharing that with you from, it's not just myself as a non-commissioned officer, as an NCO, but other NCOs and other officers, and now a full bird colonel that is sharing the exact same philosophy and experience as to what we've all dealt with, how we see things, and the direction that things should go to make things better. So anyhow, another thing I want to share with you real quick tonight and other news is the Democrats doubling down on what I call stupid. You may have seen it. I don't know if you did or not, but California Representative Robert Garcia. If y'all haven't heard this guy, look him up. He's all over the internet. He's all over YouTube. Said that the Democrat Party needs to bring actual weapons. This is his words. Actual weapons in the fight for democracy. And he's on this stuck on stupid thing of that Donald Trump is a threat to our democracy again. And they need to bring actual weapons to this fight. Garcia went viral yesterday after mocking Tesla CEO and Department of Government Efficiency Doge, head Elon Musk during his first House Doge subcommittee hearing. Garcia, who is a member of the subcommittee, displayed a large picture of Musk. And I watched this live when it happened, and it was very disgusting that this man did this. He holds up a picture of Musk, and he says, "This is a dick pic." Couldn't make this up if you were trying, folks. Check it out. It's all over YouTube, Rumble, anywhere else you want to look at. In the follow-up to the hearing, Garcia defended his words on CNN News Central by saying Americans want him to go further than what he did. I think Musk is also harming the American public in an enormous way, Garcia said. And what I think is really important and what the American public want is for us to bring actual weapons to this bar fight. This is an actual fight for democracy, for the future of this country. Garcia also bluntly stood by his stunt when asked how efficient it could be. Do you think that calling Elon Musk a dick is effective messaging for confronting what is a potential irreversible transformation of the government? CNN host Brianna Keller asked. Well, he is a dick, Garcia replied. Representative Garcia's actions are disgusting and unbecoming of a member of Congress. Then, during a Baltimore rally that took place on Monday, Maryland Democrat Representative, and I don't even know how to pronounce this name, I'm going to try, Kweisi, Kweisi, Mfume, Mfume, pushed the idea of a street fight against those that are engaged in Doge. This will be a congressional fight, a constitutional fight, a legal fight. Days like this, a street fight. We will stand, he said. Then you may remember back last month when House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat in New York, also called for Democrats to fight Trump's agenda in the streets. Right now, we're going to keep focused on the need to look out for everyday New Yorkers and everyday Americans who are under assault by an extreme MAGA Republican agenda that is trying to cut taxes for billionaires, donors, and wealthy corporations, and then stick New Yorkers and working class Americans across the country with the bill. That's not acceptable, he said. We're going to fight it legislatively. We're going to fight it in the courts. We're going to fight it in the streets. That's what the minority leader said. These types of unhinged statements, just like the ones we've heard in the past from many other Democrats in Washington, D.C., like AOC, Alejandro Mar, Rashida Tlaib, Anita Presley, Maxine Waters, and Hillary Clinton, just to name a few, are straight up inciting violence towards Donald Trump, his supporters, Republicans, conservatives, the Doge movement. And it is past time that they be held accountable for their actions and charged criminally with what they're doing. It is my hope that the Department of Justice and the FBI will be taking action to stop this hate-filled nonsense coming from their mouths before someone gets hurt or killed. We've already had 2 assassination attempts on Donald Trump's life because of the hate coming from the left and the Democrats telling their group that he's a threat to democracy and will destroy our country and us. It is time for the Department of Justice and the FBI to step up and stop these Democrats from spreading fear-mongering BS, because that's exactly what it is. And the last thing I will leave you with tonight, we're going to go a little over by a few minutes. I'm sorry about that, but I think it's very important that you all hear this. Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency is doing some digital archaeology into the dark closet of federal spending, and the skeletons that are now turning aren't very pretty. It's been written over the past 2 years about the Biden administration's use of taxpayer money to facilitate illegal immigration. We've talked about it on this show many, many times. But the complaint about headlines like Elon Musk said Doge uncovered $59 million in payments for luxury hotels, even if Musk's work was more to publicize than to uncover. Thanks to Biden's open border and mass parole programs, millions of aliens enter the U.S. border, come across illegally over the past 4 years. Over the same time frame, Congress granted, are you ready for this? $31 billion to the Department of Health and Human Services to provide housing, medical, and legal services to illegal aliens. And AOC tonight is putting out Zoom meetings telling illegal aliens how to get away from being charged by ICE and their rights. Well, they don't have any rights, AOC. They're not American citizens, for crying out loud. But the Biden administration also actively worked to facilitate mass migration using the Federal Emergency Management Agency, also known as FEMA, whose mission is to help disaster-stricken Americans, not aid illegal aliens. Via the Department of Homeland Security, the Biden administration channeled billions to FEMA, which in turn granted states, cities, and nonprofits money to transport, house, and care for illegal immigrants. From fiscal year 2021 to fiscal year 2024, Congress gave FEMA's Shelter and Service Program $2.2 billion for nonprofits and local entities to provide support to non-citizens released from Department of Homeland Security custody. This means to pay an illegal alien released at the border. In 2024 alone, FEMA set aside $640.9 million in shelter and service grants to enable non-federal entities to offset allowable costs incurred for services associated with non-citizen migrant arrivals in their communities. The top recipient was Denver, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Massachusetts, New York, and Philadelphia. Democrat-run states and cities with sanctuary policies offering free housing and service to illegal aliens. Biden also used the Emergency Food and Shelter Program, a FEMA grant program authorized back in 1987 to help homeless veterans, to pipe another $1 billion into housing illegal immigrants. The 59 million Doge just flagged was doled out as part of one of FEMA's grants to house illegal aliens in New York City in more than 200 jerry-rigged shelters that include formerly luxurious hotels like the Roosevelt. This isn't an anomaly. It's just the latest payment in a 4-year federal subsidy of sanctuary cities that have been exposed by Elon Musk. And these FEMA grants are just one tool among many used by the Biden administration to fund an unauthorized, taxpayer-funded mass migration system. The Biden administration, my friends, was engaged in human trafficking. Officially, refugees had been vetted and selected, are supposed to enter the U.S. through the congressional authorized U.S. refugee program, admission program, USRAP, funded by the U.S. government. U.S. Rep already had networks of NGOs and charities such as Catholic Charities, Jewish Family Services, and the Lutheran Refugee and Immigration Services. Traditionally, these NGOs were paid to help bring in and resettle a fairly small annual number of refugees. The Biden administration took this existing NGO pipeline and supercharged it with billions of dollars of federal money, and these charities went from handling tens of thousands of cases per year to millions through many different channels and programs. In November of 2024, retired Border Patrol Officer J.J. Carrell told a flabbergasted House Homeland Security Committee the Department of Homeland Security was cutting checks for $600 million to Jewish Family Services along every 3 months that year. Also, the government granted over $550 million to various Lutheran charities in fiscal year 2024, most of it for illegal immigrants. Catholic Charities USA received $1.4 billion in grants alone in 2024 to be used for illegal aliens. Much of these taxpayer dollars went directly to the task of importing illegal aliens. Americans have seen the consequences of wide open borders, but might not have focused on the fact that it was done with their money. Your money, my money, was going to pay for all this stuff. Doge Candle Power can enlighten them very, very much. It is absolutely stunning what they are exposing, which is why the Democrats in Washington, D.C. are doing everything in their power to change the narrative and shut down Doge, shut down Elon Musk, and try and make you believe that he's this horrible villain that is out to take away money from starving women and children and medical supplies. And it's just all nonsense. It's not true. They want to stop him because he's exposing what they have been doing for the past 4 years, which is taking your money and spending it on illegal immigrants and other countries, to include countries that do not like us. Now it's being exposed, and now it's going to be stopped. Now it's a matter of time before our Justice Department gets involved to do something with these judges that are trying to stop Doge as well. And I do believe that they're on top of this, and we're going to see a lot of things change this year. So we'll be reporting on it right here. Folks, tomorrow is Valentine's Day. Guys, girls, whatever, go out there and get something for your sweetheart. And if you don't have a sweetheart, I'm sorry. One day maybe you will, or maybe your sweetheart is passed on. And remember them this Valentine's Day, and remember the good memories that you had with them. I will be back next Tuesday for another live broadcast, and Wednesday with my wife, and then Thursday as well. I hope that you will tune in. If anything breaks between now and the weekend that's of importance to American patriots, I will be sure to do a video about it, or I'll come on live. Other than that, I hope you all have a wonderful and blessed weekend and a wonderful, happy Valentine's Day, or as we used to call it when we were stationed in Korea, Happy VD Day. Read between the lines on that one. One more time, special shout out to my guest, U.S. Army Colonel James Hutton, for coming on the show tonight. It was a pleasure to hear what all he had to say. I hope that you enjoyed it as well. And I hope that you will share this video, especially with your friends or family members that are veterans or in the military serving today. As always, please say a prayer for our men and women serving in the United States military, our veterans, our law enforcement officers, our first responders, their families, our angel families, our blue and gold star families in our country. May God bless the United States of America. May God bless each and every one of you. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you all next Tuesday.